Hi, it's challenge time again with element 14, and this time around it's the Enchanted Objects challenge, where you have to take relatively ordinary household objects and make them into something that has the flavor of being enchanted. And I've applied for this and been accepted onto the challenge, and what I'm going to do is take what would be, to all intents and purposes, a general purpose mirror and make it into an enchanted object. So what I'm going to do is take a screen of about 23-24 inches size and put it behind an infinity mirror, which we're also going to make, and have it illuminate and give us things like the weather forecast when you walk and stand in front of it, to maybe suggest some clothes to wear, potentially also integrate with the front door alarm and things like that, or the doorbell to show you who's outside, and a few other things that we may think of. Anyway, to start this challenge, I wanted to just experiment with some two-way mirrors. So what I've done is gone down to the local hardware store and I picked up a few supplies. So one of them is a roll of, what is this stuff called? Window film, all right? And what it is it's a privacy control window film, and it gives you a mirror finish. Now, it's supposed to only be used on glass. I'm actually going to use it on plexi, and I've done a little bit of experimenting and it seems to work. So in order to try things out, I'm actually going to take a couple of small pieces of plexi. These are just, what size are these? 8 inches by 10 inches. So I'm going to make a small infinity mirror and put something like a cell phone or a like up to a 7-inch LCD screen behind it and see how well it works before I start committing to a great big 23-inch screen, which I have to rip apart, and potentially that might not be recoverable once I'm done, because I'm going to have to screw it into a wooden frame and things like that. Anyway, these are the sheets I've got to use, and at the end of the day, we're going to take some sheets of this film, which I've just cut a couple of pieces a little bit bigger than the plexiglass that I'm going to use them on, and we're going to get these things fitted and see how well it works. So let's get to the first stage of this, which is to fit the film onto the plexiglass. Now, what you're going to need for this is basically some kind of soapy water. Now, I've just picked up the stuff that is available straight from the hardware store for this, but if you don't have any of this, you can always use no Tears baby shampoo or something like that, I'm told. So all the instructions came with the film, and basically I'm just going to take you through how to get the film onto the plexiglass, and a few tips and tricks of doing that, and then we'll see how well it works by putting some strip LEDs behind it and do some testing. So let's get to it. So first things first here with the plexiglass is you need to take off the film on one surface, because these typically come with film on both surfaces. So we just peel this off to get one side clean. We'll leave the plastic on the other side because we don't want to get it all scratched up while we're working on it. So it will look a little bit weird until we're done, but necessary. So take that off. What you probably also want to do is actually give it a thorough clean before you continue, and make sure there are no rough edges on the plexiglass. Like right now I can feel a rough edge on here where it's been cut, so if you try and put the film onto this while that's there, it's basically not going to stick on the edges. So I'm just going to go get a sharp blade and clean that off. So the easiest way I find to get these edges off is to use a sharp craft knife or box cutter kind of knife, and just basically scrape it along the edge. Make sure you don't cut your fingers, and it will take that little edge off quite nicely. Excuse the screeching while I do this. Thing to remember when you're also doing this is that in scraping around the edges, you're actually going to generate some static. So when you're done, you probably want to just take a lint-free cloth, and just a lint-free cloth and a bit of the soapy water, and just to get rid of the static and get rid of any crap that might be sitting on it, give it a wipe over and dry it thoroughly, so that there's no more bits of plexiglass sticking there, because obviously you don't want to get that under the film at all, because then it's going to leave little lumps on the glass, well, on the plexiglass. And it will just not give you the finish. So that should be pretty good for what we're doing. You can see a few lumps or marks on the plexiglass in camera here, they're actually on the outside, because the film on the inside, so that's perfectly fine. I've also got this in a hard piece of time between the film surface pushing it. So the next thing we have to do here is this film, as I said, I've cut this to slightly bigger than what I require, but there's actually a protective plastic on this film, and the way that you can actually it's difficult to tell what side the plastic surface is on. It's normally actually wrapped on the outside when it's rolled up in the film, so theoretically it's on this side of the film. And the way that you can get this apart, because it is really difficult to actually get your fingers on the end here and separate it, is by using a little bit of tape. So if you take some tape here and you actually put it on the corners, if you just fold a little bit of the tape over so you've got something to get a hold of, and then take a bit of it and just tape it on the film right on the edge. Now remember, we've got some overlap here, so it doesn't matter that you're going to put the tape on it particularly. And now take another piece and put it in the other direction. It actually will make it much easier to separate the film from the plastic. So if you do this like that, okay, and now if you just take these, as you can see, the film just came right away. I tried doing this without using a bit of tape, and it was a royal pain in the butt. So this is a great tip for being able to get the film separated. All right, so I'm just going to give that a final wipe down. Now, a lot of people I've seen online, when they talk about this, they say, oh yeah, you know, you're encouraged to waste all this soapy fluid that you buy, because these bottles are about $6 for a bottle. I mean, it's not terribly expensive, but you know, if you're on a tight budget, it can be something you don't necessarily need. But whatever you do, you really do want to have a good soapy surface. Now we want to make sure we don't get any contaminants on this side of the film when we're doing it. But one thing it does tell you to do is, if you soap down your surfaces ahead of time, right? Now remember, these little marks here are on the other side of the surface. So let's just soap this down, because it makes it film go on a lot easier if you can slide it around. As you scrape out the bubbles using a squeegee or something. So we'll wet that down with the sponge, and then we'll take this and we'll do the same thing with this. We'll just take it partly apart, and to prevent it, because this side of the film also has a slight adhesive on it, and we'll just wet this down as well. All right. That way it's not going to stick on itself. We'll just peel the rest of that off. All right, we'll get rid of that out of the way, and we'll just spray the rest of this. Now we have an easy way of just putting this onto the film, onto the plexiglass. We'll just lay it on top. Remember, we have quite an overlap. So what you do is you just put it on. Make sure you're using your overlap all around. And then in order to make your squeegee work, and what I've got is a little squeegee like this just out of the kitchen. It's got a soft rubber edge on. If you really want to, you can use a, I have one here somewhere, an old credit card or something with a reasonably soft edge on it. That'll work well as well. But what we're going to do is use the squeegee as best we can. So it also pays to squirt the top as well, which means your squeegee is going to slide around a bit. All right, it makes it easier for everything to smoothen, so you don't scratch the surface. Now underneath this, of course we've got all of the soapy solution, and it's got the plexiglass between it. So now start from the middle, and if you just start scraping it out, you can actually then get rid of all the air bubbles inside. And any liquid bubbles, of course. The liquid itself, even if you don't get every last drop out of inside of the plexiglass, it will apparently evaporate through the film when it dries. So that's good news to know. And using a lint-free cloth too, just take away any excess liquids on the edge. Now remember, it's there's a lot of solution underneath too, so it pays to just mop up and outside when it's rolled up in the film. So theoretically it's on this side of the film, and the way that you can get this apart, because it is really difficult to actually get your fingers on the end here and separate it, is by using a little bit of tape. So if you take some tape here and you actually put it on the corners, if you just fold a little bit of the tape over so you've got something to get a hold of, and then take a bit of it, and that's pretty much all there is to it, is to put that down. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to just do the other one, and then we'll have to leave this for a while to dry. I'll just give it a little bit for the moisture to get settled a bit, and then I'm going to trim the edges. And then we should be able to proceed to the next level of testing. So we're back in a little bit. So I'm giving it a little bit just to stick down, and what I'm doing now, before I let it get too dry, is I'm just trimming the edges off close to the plexiglass, so that I don't do too much damage later on. When it's actually fully set. So if I do make an error right now, I can actually adjust a bit easier. So I'm just the film is very damaging to blades. Let's say it can actually blunt a blade very quickly because it's metallized. So all I'm doing is running my knife up against the edge of the plexiglass and just trimming it right to the edge as I go around. Two sides done. Third side, and start sliding in. Then you'll basically cut the corners off, and just run down, and go the other direction. And the last bit at the top. And we keep some. I just did it. Cut corner. A little bit difficult. Let's trim that last bit in a second. And do the last edge. Turn around rather than trying to get the side instead. And I'm just going to have the border on this side. It won't need a little edge. Slightly get the edge will not notice when we're done, because they will be hidden underneath the piece of the edge. So I'm just going to trim that last bit off. There we go. And go that way. So there's the final piece here, which is one of them. Trim down. I'm just going to set the edge, a little bit of rubber, because I think that's the thing as well. Keep looking right now, just move around, so any ring bubbles underneath can be removed. Fine. Just take it right off the edges. Never mind, any liquid out from underneath. There we go. And that pretty much is one piece of low-cost mirror glass sticking right underneath. Okay, I got the second sheet done, so I just need to let these things dry for a while before I just give them a quick wipe to get fingerprints off and things like that. As I said, the soapy liquid underneath, mostly you squeegee it out, and what little bit is left will evaporate and disappear in any little bumps that are on the plexiglass, and I think there's a few on here. It's difficult to see on this. It will disappear hopefully over the next couple of days, but I think for what we're doing, it's probably not too much of a worry. So, and the way this works is, it's a two-way mirror, but it's based on whatever side has the lighter environment is the side that you can see into. So because we're going to actually have this surrounded with a dark area, and on the back is going to be black, you actually won't be able to see into it. Okay, to get a rough idea of what this is going to look like, these things haven't obviously had more than enough time really to dry out inside, but I can handle them now, so I wanted to give you a quick idea of what it'll be like. So what I've got is I've just grabbed a Raspberry Pi LCD screen, which I'm just going to boot up in a second once we've set up the stack, to see how well it will shine through. It's not very bright because it's not designed for this kind of thing, and it's just being powered off the Pi, but it should be good enough to test. So what we'll do is we'll take the first pane that we've got, the foil side goes down, and I'm just going to lay it directly on top of the LCD screen, because that's how it would be with a LCD monitor. In fact, I was even considering putting the film directly on the LCD panel itself if I can, but I might still be better off putting a sheet of plexiglass in front of it. Anyway, so here's a piece of plexi. You can see it's a pretty good mirror right on its own right away. Now this is not Normally with an infinity mirror, the back mirror would be 100% mirror, not a partial. But because I want to shine an image through it, then I'm using two-way mirrors effectively. So the next thing is I've got a little piece of LED strip here that I'm just going to just casually lay down around this thing to try and just make some kind of image to test it. So we'll just lay this down in a circle or something. We'll see how well that works. I'm just, just chucking it down any old how for the moment. This is just for a proof of concept before I start cutting wood and committing to it. And let's just take the second piece here, and I got the plastic down, and we'll just lay it on top. That'll keep things in place. So now what we have is you basically can't see the LCD screen at the bottom. You can't see the rope light either. So let me just turn the rope light on now and see if that actually even does the infinity mirror part of this. So let's just turn that on now. There we go. Well, I guess that works okay. That's coming up with a nice red infinity mirror. I just tip the camera a little bit so you can see. I turn this direct facing light off. That actually works pretty good, and if I lift the gap a bit, we'll probably get a much better depth, yep, on here. So that's nice. And one of the cool things I like doing with these is you just put a little bit of pressure in the middle. You can actually give the image to curl right underneath, which is kind of nice. Anyway, so that's the image. Let's get the remote, see what it looks like when we animate it. It's not a WS2812 addressable LEDs. These are just a strip that I had laying around, but they definitely look like they'll do the job as far as an infinity mirror is concerned with the plastic there. I've got nothing blocking the light from getting around underneath, so you can see a faint outline of the Raspberry Pi underneath. So now let me just power up the Raspberry Pi, and we'll see how well that shows through. So I just turned it on now. Its default is to power right up. So it too is acting a little bit like an infinity mirror in the middle there. If I just zoom in a little bit, and then we'll wait for this thing. You can see it starting to boot up. Now obviously we're going to have a much bigger screen. I wouldn't expect anybody to read this writing. It's also not on full brightness from the LCD panel, but let's just let it boot up and we'll see how well it behaves. Or how visible it is anyway, sorry. Oh, well, that seems to be working quite well. If I turn off the infinity mirror for a moment, part of it, then that becomes very, very visible. Now, obviously, you wouldn't normally have such a small image. I would have the whole screen showing up, so it should be able to be quite effective. And if I reduce the number of colors to, say, just white and a couple of other primary colors, it should shine through quite nicely. When I'm looking straight at it, it actually is quite readable. The camera is at a slight angle, so it's not quite as good, and it's also a very, very small screen. But that looks like we might be onto a winner with that. If necessary, what I could probably do is cut the film away from the screen in the middle so that it's not acting as a infinity mirror with the actual text and everything, which will make it much more readable. But I think for the moment this gives us a good sense that the approach is going to work. Now the next thing is obviously to start looking at, I'm going to put this into a frame and do a couple of extra things to make sure it's going to be good, and then move on to doing something with the big 23-inch LCD screen and putting in a infinity around it. So I think what I'm going to end up with is probably something that's going to be about 32 inches in diagonal, or even bigger, by the time I put a frame around, LCD panel in the middle, sensors, and the control system and everything. So that's good. Anyway, I just thought I'd give you an introduction to this. What I want to do is basically what I've just shown you here, but also be able to have some kind of sensor when somebody comes up to the front door to turn the camera on, can show their face here, or if you walk up to it from the inside, an internal sensor would give you the weather forecast and maybe suggesting some kind of you know, winter wear, or you know, an umbrella, or depending on what the weather forecast is, you know, just make some suggestions of what to wear and stuff like that. And maybe even tweets and messages and stuff like that, you know, tips for the day, or you know, message from mom if it's one of the kids going out. Not sure how I would identify each of the kids. Could look at some facial recognition stuff if there's time, but I don't want to make this thing too complex. In the last challenge I did, I gave myself a very, very large challenge, and it took a huge amount of time to get done. So in this case, I want to keep it a little bit simpler and make it more manageable, so that I don't let go of all my other road tests and blogging. So anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. Put the infinity mirror back on. That's pretty good. So anyway, we'll see you again soon to start looking at the next stage.